these high-profile journalists and these amazing writers all around the world, leaving their established media companies or established media entities to set up independent publications and creating sustainable careers around it. So it seemed, I guess this is sort of a testament to the right creator tool can unlock an entire sort of latent part of the economy that is just waiting to be unleashed.
The business models are evolving, things are changing. What started off in the beginning was newsletters being started on Substack, on Ghost, and so on and so forth. There were subscriptions, there were advertisements, there were VC funds being built off of newsletters. But fundamentally, it's about community building. You can do that in any way and monetize it through lots of ways. So what might the Tigerfeathers community look like?
What they tell you is a startup career is high risk, high reward. But I would guarantee you that most people only hear the high reward part of it and don't even consider high risk. That's how we are as humans. That's how our operating system works.
Hi, everyone. I'm Utkarsh, the founder of Network Capital, here with Rahul Sanghi, the founder of this fascinating brand called Tigerfeathers. My upcoming book focuses on passion economy and the side hustle revolution, and Rahul has done exactly that. He quit his mainstream job, whatever that means, to basically create something new, build his category of one. And today we're going to learn a bit more about his career and how he got started and why he essentially quit his stable job to do something interesting. Rahul, welcome to NC. Tell us a bit about yourself and Tigerfeathers.
Thanks, Utkarsh. And I think maybe the short answer for why I quit my job to do this is because I'm an idiot, but we'll get to that, I'm sure, through the course of the, no, I'm just messing, but we'll get to that through the course of the conversation, I'm sure. So like you mentioned, I'm currently working full-time on building a media brand called Tigerfeathers. And I say media brand because it started off as a Substack newsletter, but I'm hoping that that just represents the first piece for much wider jigsaw puzzle. And particularly, I want the Tigerfeathers brand to go beyond media and different sort of end destinations for it, whether that's using it as a vehicle for venture capital or using it as a springboard to creating a software product. Or a bunch of stuff in between. But essentially how I came to this point, like you mentioned, my last full-time gig was with Visa, where I spent about a year sort of heading that fintech practice in India and South Asia. Before that, I bounced around the startup world in India, primarily with a company called Koinex, which at the time was India's largest cryptocurrency exchange. Back in 2018 and 2019, even though we had a very good sort of first run, because of the government's antagonistic position towards cryptocurrencies, we essentially pivoted out of that business and set up a new enterprise software business called FloBiz. That's since doing very well today. And prior to that, I started my career as a consultant at KPMG in London. About halfway through realizing that this entire world of blockchain technology and crypto assets was worth going all in on. And I essentially got the chance to help the firm build out its global blockchain and crypto practice for a short couple of years before I realized that I missed the sun and moved back to India to sort of kick off my career here. So it's been a bunch of different interesting steps in between. And I'm trying to see if this Tigerfeathers thing can be something real, at least over the next few years.
Yeah. So look, Tigerfeathers has become a newsletter which is mentioned by a lot of interesting people. I've heard Balaji Srinivasan mention it. I've heard people in the government talk about it. People in NPCI mention it. So it's fascinating. It's not easy for somebody to start like a newsletter and reach the scale that you've managed to. How did that happen? And what's the process of achieving the scale, in your opinion?
So one, I would not say that, I wouldn't even say that we've reached a scale that I think this can reach, and to the point where this can command leverage in a bunch of different capacities. But I can say that we're on the way there. The story is that back in 2020, just as the sort of pandemic was kicking off and the wave of lockdowns began, I left my role at FloBiz and was sort of a little bit lost, trying to figure out what was going to come next. I've always loved writing and read. I've always been a.
You should have joined Network Capital that time.
You should have given me a call. But no, so back then I was essentially a little bit lost, trying to figure out what was my next move. Obviously, there's a lot of anxiety that comes with the pandemic and best laid plans being laid to waste. And I had always been a reader, always been a writer, always loved writing, never sort of published my work in public or any other social platform. But I've been paying attention to this Substack phenomenon at the tail end of 2019 and early 2020 takeoff. And you were seeing all these high profile journalists and these amazing writers all around the world leaving their established media companies or established media entities to set up independent publications and creating sustainable careers around it. So it seemed, I guess this is sort of a testament to the how the right creator tool can unlock an entire sort of latent part of the economy that is just waiting to be unleashed. And I think Substack did that for writing talent all over the world, whether that was existing journalists and writers, as well as giving aspiring writers like myself the platform to take a chance on your abilities or your passion. So the start of the pandemic, me and my partner, who's one of my oldest and best friends, Ariman Veer, who is the founder of Prophetic Ventures, I sort of pitched to him saying that he had done a bit of writing publicly as well. And at the start of lockdowns, I published a couple of short pieces on the actual pandemic, just sort of my thoughts on what was happening around the world and how it was making me feel going through it. And I said that maybe it was time to put out some writing on our opinions on tech and business, because we both had a bunch of experience and a bunch of different roles in the startup world, the venture world, and particularly crypto. Both of us had been in the space for a number of years, him even longer than I had. And we said, okay, maybe it's time to see if we can turn content into commerce and what is the best way to do that. So the way I described it is every time you create a piece of content, that's essentially a digital asset you're creating for yourself. And by doing it in the form of a newsletter where you're also capturing email signatures and building an audience, a quantifiable audience, you're essentially creating an asset for yourself that will continue to hopefully give you some kind of benefit going on. So we said, okay, let's just give it a shot. Started publishing first our thoughts on the Indian tech ecosystem, then crypto more broadly. And of course, like you mentioned, because both of us had experience volunteering with iSpirit, which is the think tank in India that builds and evangelizes a lot of our public digital infrastructure. A lot of that content hadn't been sort of packaged for a global audience. And the likes of Balaji and many others were sort of awakened to the fact that some amazing stuff is happening in India. And India as a sort of tech hub is worth paying attention to. So it's been a sort of trial and error effort. I would say that where we've excelled in quality, we've lacked in consistency. And that's, I think, the main sort of change we need to make to turn the afterburners onto this effort or onto this venture. So it's just a matter of responding to your audience, seeing what sticks. And at the end of the day, you're trying to double down on your personality and your unique knowledge. And there's no sense trying to copy anyone else. So I don't know, lots of rambling answers there, but sort of planted the seeds at the start of the pandemic. And now it's been 2 years, and it's crazy to see how fast the efforts of compounding sort of accrue to an honest effort to doing something cool online.
It clearly shows. Talk to us about how you started volunteering with iSpirit, and how did you write the UPI or the fintech ecosystem paper that was really long. It's almost a mini book
Yeah,
Walk us
yes.
through that.
For better or worse, that's basically our house style. It's a funny thing that most people will tell you that no one has the patience for long form writing online, and that attention spans have dwindled, and people like short form content, bite sized content, little snippets, the TikTokization of content online. But where I guess we both have a problem where we want to tell the readers the whole story. Like, at least for me, when I'm writing a piece, in my mind, what's happening is I'm trying to see what questions I would have as an uninitiated reader if I was going through this piece or going through this story. And I'm trying to answer all those questions or preempt all those questions before a reader has a chance to say, hey, I don't know what that means. I'm going to open another tab and Google this thing. So the approach that we've always taken is give the reader the whole story. Try to close any open loops that may appear in the mind of a reader when they're going through it. So with regards to all the content around India Stack or UPI or Oken, all these amazing things that that have been the product of public and private partnerships in India, it was just a matter of creating almost a single piece of content that could do the job of serving as a missionary across the internet. So what we identified at the time was all of this amazing, or this entire story of the Aadhaar or UPI or India Stack more broadly that had been taking place in India over the last 10 years. And you could easily make the case that it's probably one of the most important technological breakthroughs anywhere in the world. And for some reason, it hadn't really translated to a global understanding or appreciation of India's efforts. And we chalked that down to a lack of good content around it, or a lack of a singular piece of content that could just drive home what was happening here. So it's a thesis that strings through all the topics we write about. It's, hey, this is one thing you should read to understand everything you need about this topic. And that's the sort of philosophy that we try to incorporate in everything we put out.
Yeah. In my upcoming book, there's a chapter on the newsletter economy. I look at people like Ben Thompson who've done this in the US. He's Packy McCormick. He's starting to do that, unpack the newsletter economy space. Now there's a venture capital fund associated with it as well. So who are the people who've influenced your writing? And more broadly, who are the people who helped you think through the newsletter economy, the business model, the commerce aspect of it?
Sure. So you rightly mentioned Packy McCormick at Not Boring. He's setting the standard. I think it's fair to say it's him and Mario Gabriel from the Generalist, both of whom write about the tech ecosystem, primarily in the US, but globally as well. And they've taken very different models in terms of monetizing their work. So whereby Packy has early on leveraged advertising within each newsletter issue to drive the engine of his actual business. Mario set up a sort of premium community where you could subscribe to be part of this elite group of interesting people or smart people that could yield you your next business partner, your next venture, your next investor, et cetera, et cetera. So both of them I really pay close attention to in terms of monetizing the newsletter, as well as just the quality of content they put out. The fact that Packy puts out, or at least in the last year and a half, put out 2 of these a week, it like physically blows my mind because I cannot do that. And I don't know how you can squeeze out that much good work in that short period of time. But aside from them two, I love Morgan Housel. He has just such a unique flair for capturing the mundane with regards to market movements and presenting it from the lens of
money,
market psychology. So he's someone I pay, or at least I read a lot of his work. Paulina Marinova, she also quit her job at Fortune, I believe, to set up a newsletter called The Profile, where literally she just does these amazing in-depth profiles of interesting people all around the world. So I'm constantly fascinated and just have so much respect for the people who quit their jobs and taken a chance and actually made it happen. So at least from a writing perspective, those are the folks I pay real close attention to.
Yeah, and it's an ever-growing space. The business models are evolving. Things are changing. What started off in the beginning was newsletters being started on Substack, on Ghost, and so on and so forth. There were subscriptions, there were advertisements, there were VC funds being built off of newsletters. But fundamentally, it's about community building. You can do that in any way and monetize it through lots of ways. So, what might the Tiger Feathers community look like? What do you have a flavor of that? Have you thought about it?
So I would say it's definitely curious people like us who are interested in learning about tech, about business, about areas of venture capital. I think what we've realized, or at least what I've realized, at least I've been in the crypto space for a few years now, and every time I go do, say, a one-on-one session on Bitcoin or crypto or Web3, it's amazing to me. The fact that 100% of the people there, if you explain it the right way, really appreciate learning about new topics. And I think that it's probably the main thing I've learned when I've tried to bring other people into the Web3 or crypto fold, is that everyone loves learning. And it's just about being a good teacher or packaging material or content in the right way that respects your audience, respects their time, and also you can make it entertaining enough that they realize why you're excited about that topic. And I find that 100% of people love learning. It's no sort of privileged group, or you have to be born a certain way or in a certain field for you to be a learner. I think it's just about how you're packaging certain content and what kind of story you're telling. So that's the main thing I've learned. So I think that the content we put out, I would still say, I would, with a clear conscience, say that I think we produce some of the best content on tech in India. I think our audience does skew Indian, but because we've touched on crypto and India's public digital infrastructure efforts, I think that's brought us a global audience. So if I had to segment it, it would probably be founders, operators, and investors for the most part. But anyone just curious about learning new things, that's, I think, the direction we'll go in. Because when we started off, it wasn't like we said we'd restrict ourselves to just talking about this topic or this topic. It's, hey, what do we think is interesting? What do we think is cool? And what do we think that we can tell in our uniquely weird, sort of curious ways? So that's the community I think we're trying to reach out to. I think what's cool is we're starting to see some of those folks give us input on what kinds of topics they want to be covered. We're starting to hear back from our audience about getting investment opportunities into startups, advisory opportunities. So I think we're still in the very early days of that. And it's really exciting to me that there's a two-way dialogue that we're starting to see emerge. And that, to me, is the clearest indication that this is moving from an audience to a community, where the Tigerfeathers brand or the Tigerfeathers content, it's just a lighthouse for like-minded people to gather around. And after that, hopefully we can just throw a party where we don't have to steer the direction of conversation that's happening on its own. And all the folks are just bounded by, I suppose, what the Tigerfeathers brand stands for, which is curious, tech, business, and we like to learn. I suppose that's probably how I would summarize it.
It's fascinating. You can unbundle this into, say, a policy think tank, into a consulting company, into a community that just meets and learns new things, and also a fund in addition to being a publishing house. So lots to unpack, lots to explore there. I was fascinated by your last piece on careers. And since Network Capital is all about careers and ed tech and learning, I thought it'll be interesting for you to describe the passion economy, the creator economy, the way you see it.
So to me, the creator economy is just a symptom of the fractionalization of media. I think it's hardly an original statement to say that every company is a media company, but the fact is that as soon as any kind of business, a commercial interaction, or any kind of content, once you reduce it to a screen, whether that's a laptop screen or a phone, essentially you're placing it at par with everything else that's on your screen. So at least what that's meant in practice in the last 10 years is that people armed with a phone or armed with a laptop, enabled by these new tools like YouTube, Spotify, Substack, whatever, suddenly find that they excel at grabbing people's attention much better than any sort of multi 100-person institution can do. Because fundamentally people relate to people and people can communicate with people much better than any institution trying to ape how people would actually communicate, which is what brands tend to do online. So to me, one, it starts with the fact that people are much better at capturing attention of people than institutions could be. I think the fact that people can do that with a much smaller budget. You look at the likes of, say, the average YouTuber who can create content with just a phone, turning it on themselves, your Casey Neistats and the like, who have excelled at turning a bare bones media operation into a complete global media brand. I think one, it starts with individuals being able to capture attention better than institutions. And two is you have this range of businesses and entrepreneurs that are coming to use software to increase the leverage that these individuals have on the internet, whether that's to capture more attention or whether that's to turn that attention into advertising or turn that attention into dollars in whatever form that may be, whether that's selling merchandise, whether that's selling advertising, whatever the case may be. But it's just it's about the shifting of influence from institutions to individuals and what individuals can do with that influence. That's at least to me what the creator economy is.
And it's a defining characteristic of the 21st century, a defining characteristic of millennials and Gen Zs. And it's something that can really unbundle work from employment, unbundle the education system. Have you experienced some of this unbundling in your own life where you're doing multiple things associated with an idea, as opposed to having one job, one identity, one work life, whatever that means?
So 100%. And you alluded to the last piece I wrote, which was about 3D careers, or how I would call it. And I simplified it into two distinct tracks, as you can choose today to build your career either in the conventional way, where you're in a linear fashion trying to build different positions and hierarchies for yourselves within an organization that obviously leads to incremental salaries, positions, titles, etc. And the other track you can take, and that's the sort of creator economy track, which is building an audience. And of course, there's lots of different ways and different sort of permutations you can define for yourself. But at least based on my experience in the last 2 years, I think the easiest way to define the different approaches you can take today, especially for millennials and Gen Zs, is you can choose to either earn by building an audience or earn by earning a salary or setting up a business. And I think that, as you rightly mentioned, you can do both at the same time. I think most sort of Gen Z folks in the sort of Gen Z cohort understand this very intuitively by being very online on Twitter, constantly engaging with their heroes and people they admire, just being very authentic online, and being able to build an audience that they can translate to these newfangled jobs like chief meme officer or community manager, which are real jobs in the internet age that we could not have dreamed up 5 or 10 years ago. So at least when I think about it, and obviously you mentioned at the start, I left my job to see if we could turn Tigerfeathers, or I could turn Tigerfeathers into my full-time job. Right now, I'm not monetizing this effort, but I do hope that it eventually monetizes in some way, shape, or form. So at least how I justify it to myself is, right now I've shifted from the original conventional track to the audience building track. And I'm hoping that they can intersect somewhere down the line. But in my mind, that's how I look at it. This is not a career break, even though I'm not full-time in an office anywhere. And a lot of my time is spent on Twitter, learning, interacting with people, networking, whatever the case may be. That's how I would describe it to myself, is I'm on this audience building creator economy track right now. And let's see where that leads.
100%. Your passion should be your profession, and there are ways to do it. Experimentation is one, networking is the other, learning and teaching is a couple of other ways that work as well. But I'm sure it was a bit scary. Do you want to talk us through your journey of sending in the resignation email and just like telling your folks about it?
It was extremely scary. It was extremely scary. And I probably dilly-dallied on that for way longer than I would even care to admit. So at least for me, when the decision to join Visa, which obviously, given the fact that I had been in the startup world for a few years, is maybe a reverse approach than what some people take. And
Sure.
at the time, my logic was that one, Visa is very, at least maybe, I mean, this might be useful for your audience as well in terms of choosing a corporate gig versus a startup gig. Because at least in the last 2 years, the startup world has become even, or appears more sexier than it ever has been, at least to Indian students
To
that are
most
looking
people,
for,
yeah.
sorry?
Yeah. To
Yeah,
most people, yeah.
looking for a career. And what they do, or what they tell you is a startup career is high risk, high reward. But I would guarantee you that most people only hear the high reward part of it and don't even consider high risk. That's how we are as humans. That's how our operating system works. So it is, there is something to be said. At least now we're seeing a sort of different macro environment, and the startup ecosystem having to sort of rejig itself accordingly. And that the in the last 2 years, I would say, and maybe the last five, the perceived risk of taking a startup job has appeared less than what it actually is. And that's a choice that you genuinely have to weigh up. The corporate gig, the sort of established company, there is a certain ease that comes with not having to worry about whether you will exist 6 months from now or whether you will need to fundraise 12 months from now. And that weighs in all, or that sort of, the effects of that you see in all sorts of different ways. There's definitely less of a sense of urgency in day-to-day operations, which may be good for some people and bad for some people. Because if you're an action-oriented people that wants to get stuff done right now, then a corporate gig may not be the choice for you, and you may find yourself more at ease in the fast-paced world of startups. And that's how I am. So the corporate world I found a little too slow for my liking. I found too many, you needed to jump through too many hoops and tick too many boxes before you could actually get anything done. And what I realized was that Visa is a giant company, a public company that is more concerned with risk management, as it should be, than it is about taking maverick bets on the future, because they're to some extent assured in their position in the global commercial landscape. So I found myself getting a little bored quite fast. And my gut told me very early on that this is probably not going to be a long-term decision for me. In the first few months at Visa, it was when our newsletter started to take off. And if you're looking at a sort of user growth chart that was perhaps like this, in the first few months at Visa, it started sort of twisting upwards. So it was like, okay, maybe this stupid brand that we started as a side project actually has some semblance of product market fit. So there is an objective decision to be made here that this might be worth pushing all my chips in and seeing if this can be something real. So it was, and I suppose many people in the creator economy have this sort of challenge where you're trying to balance a real full-time job with your actual passion alongside. And from just a time perspective, from an effort perspective, from just a mental drain perspective, it adds up. And I certainly couldn't create at the pace that I would like. So it was a very hard decision, because you don't know whether this is the right decision, and you can never know whether it's the right decision. What I will say is that I don't think you can analyze the decision from the perspective of the result, because no one can tell how something will work out. As long as you know what inputs you're taking into account or bringing into the equation in factoring what your decision is, I think you have to live with that. So at least for me, it was okay. Tigerfeathers has some traction. 2, I really love writing. 3, I find this way more professionally challenging and rewarding, because it's me. Like I put myself into each of my pieces, and I don't necessarily think I was doing that in my sort of corporate gig. So all those factors come into play where I said, okay, I don't know how this will work out, but I think this is at least the right decision for right now.
Yeah, regret of inaction is often greater than the regret of failure, if and when that happens. But it doesn't seem like failure is on the cards, Rahul, because things seem to be moving forward at at breakneck speed. Tell me about one, why do you call it Tiger Feathers? And two, how do you really write? Because your pieces again are I wouldn't say they are rambling, but they are not what you call conventional uh, journal pieces or long form pieces. So it's
Sure.
like there's a very particular style which appeals, I think, to people like the former CTO of Coinbase, to perhaps like a Gen Z trying to make his or her first crypto investment.
Yes, that's fair to say. So for starters, so the name as well just took way too long to actually iron out. So when Ariman and I thought about doing this, and we decided, okay, we're actually going to do this. We had a big Google Doc of all the weird, strange names that came to our head, and we were like, okay, we wanted to be sort of an Indian theme, tech theme, digital theme, and we had a bunch of stupid names that made up a list of like 2025. And I literally Googled cool English words and found a word called horse feathers, which I don't know if you're aware of or not. But horse feathers is like this old English term for an exclamation or a surprise. So we said, okay, horse feathers sounds interesting. What if we put an Indian spin on it, call it tiger feathers? So originally the brand had an exclamation point to it as well, but we found that way too complicated, or not too complicated, but people kept leaving the exclamation point off when they were like reposting our stuff. It became a little untidy for the brand. So we just dropped the exclamation and it became Tiger Feathers, which looks quite clean. And I think it's a unique and it's a fun name. So there's no real meaning behind it. This was just okay, what's a silly name that also has an Indian connotation, and we sort of settled on Tiger Feathers. Do you? Well, I don't know if that is a sophisticated enough answer, but that's at least how we came to this decision. And for my writing practice or my process, you're very right. Like there is a sense of rambling or a stream of consciousness to it. At least for me, how it works is I have a notes folder in my computer that has a bunch. One, it has almost 20, 30 different topic ideas that anytime it pops into my head, I just keep adding to. And two, what I do is if I sort of iron out or decide I want to write about a particular topic, I just open a new notes folder. And anytime I find an article or a tweet or a podcast that fits into that topic, I just keep logging it into that folder. And when that folder looks like it's bulging full of content, I'm like, okay, this piece now needs to be written. So it's almost like when the idea comes, I note it down and have it there. And I gather research and resource material, whether it's books I read, quotes from books. I keep sort of stripping out and just adding to this folder. And when it looks like there's enough material for a piece, it's like, okay, now it's time to sit down and see if I can draw a narrative thread through this. Because fundamentally, to me, long form content is just an exercise in information ordering. That's basically it. And a lot of information, useful information on the internet or in the world to an extent, is trapped in inhospitable places. So whether that's in Wikipedia pages, whether that's in old academic papers, whether that's in old books that no one has read, you find that some of the, I guess, the secrets of the world and some of the most interesting content and insights out there are often sort of held captive in these inhospitable or inaccessible information sources. And as a writer who has, I guess, your natural curiosity for certain topics, I'm chasing down this stuff in any case. Like I love reading books in any case. So you often find that you find something interesting, almost like a piece of treasure that no one else has found before. And now I can give it to my audience and people. And the chances are they haven't heard of that before, haven't come across that before. So you're just picking out these these nuggets from all these different places, primarily on the internet, but of course offline in conversations. And you're trying to present it in a logical way, and two, in an interesting way that has a clear sense of narrative through it. And I think that's primarily the difference is if you I think it does come down to understanding people, because you have to put yourself in the mind or in the shoes of your audience and how they're consuming this piece of content, what questions pop into their head, what doesn't make sense, what thing do you know that you've written about that your audience has no idea about and you need to explain a little further. So that's at least how I construct these pieces. They are very long. I'm working on shortening them just primarily to be able to publish more often. But fundamentally, I think you can fight your natural instinct as long as you want. But my default state is I would like to give my reader a complete piece of content that is a single piece of content that they can read that gives them what they need about this topic. So that's at least my process.
And how much time does it take you to write, say, a 10,000 word article?
It takes a long time. Like I wrote a piece on NFTs that's about a couple months ago. That's the longest piece I've written. Clocks in around 20,000 words. I started writing that in December and finished that in March. So it took a long time, but in the middle, I wrote 2 shorter pieces that I published that I published as well. So I'm not sure. It takes me a while. It takes me at least a month, I would say, to put together a 10,000 word piece. And chances are that piece has been binging around in my head for even longer than that month. So that's at least what it comes down to me. It's usually one part is the thinking, one part is the research, and the actual writing comes out. It's almost the easiest part of the entire process.
Yeah. Who's your first reader and who's your strongest critic?
So I would say my partner Ariman. I trust his judgment wholeheartedly, and he's again like a nerd like me. He's a voracious reader. We've both been since we were kids. So I'd send the people I send all my pieces to is 1 to him, and 2 to my dad, who tells me when it's quite honest about when it's boring, when it looks like I'm smoking my own supply. And my mom is very kind enough to go through it for typos. So they're the 3 people that generally, who don't really have a choice, who will have to read it. But I have a bunch of friends and people whose opinion I respect in the startup ecosystem that I get opinions on before I put it out. Sajid Pai is another one who is a VC at Bloom, an amazing writer himself. And I tend to bother him quite a bit when I'm putting out a piece. So it's all of those people. And to me, it's almost, I feel really bad asking people to give advice or feedback. It's because these pieces are so long. And I know it takes so much of people's time. So I'm aware that it can be a burden and can be a lot to ask. So if anyone is actually listening to this and thinking of starting like a writer collective, or a sort of writer support group, it's been an idea that's been on my head that you want to work through, that please feel free to reach out.
Definitely. We'll add you to a writers collective on MC. A lot of people would be happy to give you feedback. And your strongest critic, like who gives you constructive feedback or who criticizes your work, if anybody?
So I would say Ariman on that perspective, because we can be quite honest with each other. And I would much rather have honest feedback than someone tell me my work is good, and then when I actually publish it, it's crickets. And that's, I find the lack of response way more unnerving than a bad response, because I find that that's the surest sign that people didn't actually jive with your work. Because if someone comes back with thoughtful criticisms or thoughtful rebuttals or a completely different way of thinking about it, as people did with the 3D careers piece, that to me is like, okay, at least people think this content is worthy of consuming, even for the perspective of debate. And that's a productive outcome in my book. An unproductive outcome is nothing. No response, no feedback, no thoughts. And that's way more frustrating than getting people coming at it with a well-intentioned critiques or well-intentioned criticism. I'm all for that. And I really do appreciate that.
Yeah. What's fascinating to me about your journey is that I think you grew up largely in India, right?
I grew up largely in India. I had a 5-year stint in the UK, one of which was I did a 1-year postgrad degree and then 4 years of work at KPMG in London, and then took the decision to move back.
Yeah.
And I did spend 6 months in Bangalore as well, but yeah, otherwise in India.
that what surprised me a bit, and you can comment on it, is that most people in India don't really learn to write when they're in school or college. Basically, you're 21, 22, and you've never written anything. You've taken exams, you've done a whole bunch of things. Um, so I just feel that you perhaps had a different kind of a schooling experience, or perhaps some experience in your childhood or adulthood shaped you the way you are. Because on Network Capital, I'm just surprised to see that there are so many people with so many great ideas, but they really struggle to put them out there because they've never learned to write. Thoughts?
That's actually a really good point, and I've spent some time thinking about that as well. So one, I don't really think that, of course, obviously lucky enough to have good schooling, I suppose, but fundamentally, I think it comes down to being a reader, especially in your childhood. I think at least I found that it's very difficult to be a good writer unless you're also a good reader.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, I think it comes down, or at least the people that I really admire who are writers, I think almost across the board, you found that they were book readers as kids or read a ton of books in their early teenage years. And that's how they have a natural idea for what sounds good or what looks good. I think it's an old Ira Glass quote is that if for anyone that's trying to go into a creative field, and you haven't created before, you've just consumed, your the sort of guiding light that you have is that you know what's good because you've been a sort of taste maker to such a large extent, or rather taste taker to such a large extent.
Right.
You know what sounds good, whether that's producing music or writing or producing film. If you're genuinely passionate about this craft, and you've watched a bunch of films or read a bunch of books or read a bunch of amazing bloggers, then you at least know what looks good to you. So when in the act of production, you're staring back at something that doesn't look good to you, there's no chance that that'll look good to someone else. So the first advice, if I would have it for anyone who wants to write, is one, you have to read. And naturally, at least I've seen it in lots of my friends as well, who weren't readers as kids, who now are making an effort to read. You can really tell the difference in their writing as well. And you correctly pointed out that the ability to write has so many positive returns to you, regardless of what field you're in. Because to me, writing is just thinking. And if you can write clearly, that means you can think clearly. At least for me, when I find that I'm writing these long form pieces, the biggest realization is I don't know what the hell I'm actually talking about till I actually get into the writing process. It's like, okay, I know very little about this idea that I thought I had a very clear grasp on, or at least I know very clearly the holes in my thinking for this and where I need to plug them in. And in my experience, I found that even looking back to my college years or my early years of my career, all across the board, very consistently, I found that I was reducing my output or trying my very best in any kind of task to reduce my output to, or reduce my deliverable to a written output. Because I found that, at least for me, that was leveling the playing field or giving myself an advantage, to be quite honest. So whether that's what it came down to, hey, let's create a business plan for how this product should look, or we're pivoting into a new business, what should we do, how should we analyze it, or you need to come up with a sort of output for why we should build out this capability in our consulting practice. All of those things, I was like, okay, I can do those things, just let me write it out. Let the final deliverable be a written piece of output, because that's where I know I can excel. And when we started Tigerfeathers and sort of had a year under our belt and was at Visa as well for a few months, I was like, why the hell am I running away from what I am quite confident now is my edge in the sort of broader professional domain? I know I like to write. I think now that I'm at least better than the average writer. And it makes no sense for me not to double down on my competitive advantage. So that's sort of fed into my decision making, at least as well. It's like I've been lucky enough over 8-9 years of professional life to now at least have this nugget of insight that, hey, this is a thing I like to do and I know I can do well, that the world seems to be appreciating also, like what other indication do I need that this is what I should be taking seriously. So yeah, that's one I do think, and that writing is almost a superpower. Many people, many better writers than me online have espoused this, like David Perel, for example, who I don't know if you're aware, but he's the writing guy on Twitter, set up a writing school. And he sort of unlocked this insight online about the magic of writing and creating content on the internet. So I've certainly found it to be immensely rewarding. I found it that there's two sort of insights that Ariman and I always bounce off of. It's one is if you describe the problem well enough, people will assume you have the solution. And two is writing online or publishing online is a way for people to have a conversation with you without taking up your time. So at least for your mission and what you're trying to do is it's a sort of networking accelerant, certainly, but it's also a way to build expertise and also learn alongside. So yeah, that's what I think about that.
That's fascinating. I really love the way you sort of found your career product market fit. It's a concept one of our community members started making popular in his podcast. So I just want to conclude by asking that, if you were to be wildly successful as a brand, as a company, what would the world look like 10 years from now, the Tigerfeathers world?
I've stopped planning ahead in many respects. I think
I'm asking you to visualize, just imagine.
Sure,
no holds barred. Yeah.
Sure. And I don't know if this is a cop-out, but when people have asked a similar question to me, what I often say is I really don't know what the destination looks like, but I'm quite certain of what the direction is. So I haven't even given myself the luxury of thinking that far because I'm constantly challenging myself on whether I can actually do this. Because okay, maybe I'll give you an actual answer. So one is, say I operate on the genuine thesis that every company is a media company. And if Tigerfeathers, and obviously if I'm on this path, I would hope that Tigerfeathers is a successful media company, which means that we are a trusted brand when it comes to consumers in India learning about any topic, whatever the case may be. I think obviously the impact of software and technology will continue to increase in the years that follow. And I would hope that people turn to Tigerfeathers as their sort of first intellectual starting point to understanding this new world. I suppose that's at the bare minimum what I would hope for Tigerfeathers in terms of monetizing. I don't know what that path is. And there's every likelihood that the path to monetization is indirect, where this leads me to my next opportunity or a sort of monetizable opportunity. That's very possible, and it would be disappointing, but it's certainly one of the potential realities that could occur. So I don't know if that's a cop-out answer, but I just haven't given myself the luxury of thinking that far ahead because I subscribe to the church of compounding, and I know that I'm very early on in my compounding journey. But I'm excited by the possibility, or I'm excited by what happens when you add 2 more years to this. That's what excites me the most. It's seeing this compound and seeing what happens with each month, with each year, what this becomes. That's as far as I go.
Well, cheers to compounding and cheers to writing more. You're a great example of the unbundling of work from employment, of the passion economy, of really building a 1-person or 2-person media company that becomes a venture capital fund, perhaps a policy think tank, lots of directions to take. We look forward to having you back for the Web3 Fellowship, and perhaps we should put you in front of our school students as well. They can learn to write and think. Rahul, keep doing what you're doing. It's a very interesting part of our careers that both of us are in, but it's also unnerving, exciting, energizing, all of these emotions combined. And I think more people should experience this, don't you think?
I completely agree. And I think that's the biggest change from full-time jobs. This is, I wake up every day, I'm like, okay, all I have to do today is either write or read. Like, I mean, it's what more could I ask for right now? So I completely agree with you. I mean, again, no one knows how things will play out, but I'm excited that this is what I'm working on right now. And thank you so much for having me on. Really appreciate you taking the time. And looking forward to seeing the fun stuff that comes out of Network Capital, and of course the exciting session with the students later this month.